Hello, everyone. I have a new microphone, so things might sound a bit different. I'm just testing it out for today because I have this microphone, and I was like, well, I may as well just use it for today's live. But hello to the penultimate live show of year 2 of the Late Night Book Club. Although I think this is like the last one until we go into year 3. But anyway, um, it's really exciting to be with you here today to discuss Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. This was a sci-fi of like weird proportions, and I definitely remember like seeing a lot of you in the chat over on Discord like discussing it, and there were definitely elements that I think will very much be interesting to discuss today. But whilst we all get settled in to discuss this, I'd love for you to pop like your star ratings into the chat and any like initial thoughts that you have, and then we'll be going swiftly over to Elias, who will basically give us his initial thoughts and reactions to this book.
Okay. Here is my solemn review for this one. So going in, I had literally no idea what this book was about. I read like the blurb, but I still wasn't sure. It was very vague, and I wasn't sure what to expect because I did hear a lot about Emily St. No, not Emily St. Henry. That's a different author. Emily St. John Mandel and her books. And this is the first book that I read from her. And so I initially went into it very hesitant, curious, and I think in the end, I read this book as somewhat very interesting and very solemn in a very quiet, like elegant type of way, sort of like Glass. Um, I liked how a lot of the book was. It was like it was very like succinct, very straight to the point, very short, but very simple at the same time. There was like small sentences that made up like smaller paragraphs, and these smaller paragraphs made up like a very short chapter in the book. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. At the end, I gave it like 4 stars. Um, it was very like profound, but in a very subtle and quiet way, which I really appreciated. And so I really liked. Probably the writing was the best aspect for me. I really liked how it all came together. This disconnect in the beginning, where you weren't sure what to expect, who these people were, but how they all interconnected in some shape, way, or form was really great. So
I love that. Okay, Noelle, your turn.
Elias, that was I'm not kidding, beautiful summary. I loved what you said about quiet and elegant. That was seriously so beautiful. So, and I have to agree with you that the writing is what really shined for me with this one. And it just felt like such an interesting product of her writing during the pandemic and like where her kind of imagination took her. I have read Station 11, and I was told that I should read The Glass House before reading this.
same.
Because there was like some tie-ins. I didn't have a chance to do that, and I kind of regret it just because it would have been really cool to see how things tied in. But I read this maybe 4 weeks ago, so if I'm a little dusty on the details.
You were on top of your shit.
I know, I read it because I had got the audiobook,
yesterday.
and I was like, I don't want this audiobook to expire on Livy, so here's the thing. My opinions on this book are so scattered because on paper, I should love this book. Like, the writing was excellent. I love various character perspectives. I love that it went over several centuries. I thought that she captured each century so well, too. Like, when she was writing way back in history, I thought it was really believable. And then, like, when you're on, like, the moon colony, I was like, this is really believable. So I thought that she was able to do that kind of time jump really well and character shift really well. And so I was like, in my wrap up, I said something like, I'll talk about this more, but I didn't love this book and I'll explain why. And so I've been trying to explain in my head why I didn't love it. And the only explanation I have is that it reminds me of how I felt the first time I watched Interstellar. Because the first time I watched Interstellar, on paper, I was like, I know this movie is good. It's just that there's so much I don't understand that I feel like I can't say I love it yet because I still feel like I'm unraveling it. And the next time I watched it, I uncovered more. And then every time I watched it, I feel like you figure something else out about the fucking fifth dimension. I don't know. So what I think is going on with this book is that just right away, it kind of reminded me of Interstellar. But I think it's a book that on the surface, I understand it is gorgeous and it is complex and it is wonderfully done. And I know if I reread it and I know how it's going to end, I'll be able to pull out those clues really well. But because I kind of felt overwhelmed by like this time jump and then some time travel and like one event affecting one part of history, like does it affect a different part of history? Like just kind of that idea. I think it just kind of overwhelmed me and confused me. But the second time I read it, I'll feel better situated and will love it more. So I don't want to rate it yet because I feel like the writing is amazing. It's just that I feel like I missed part of it because I was so overwhelmed.
Do you think maybe, because you said you listened to the book like an audiobook, right? Do you think maybe it will be like a different experience, like reading it on paper, like visually, because it talks about, or it goes through all like these weird things about time travel, like simulations and all that? I don't know.
I think that, so I read some of it with the paper version and then some of it audio. Like I kept switching back and forth. And I think you're right that like when I was reading it on page, I felt a little bit like, okay, settle in, like let's take this in, let's pause, let's figure it out. Whereas with the audiobook, I thought it was narrated so beautifully that I was just like, let's just listen to a story and have it take me away. So I want to give it a 3 right now because there were parts that I absolutely loved and then parts that were confusing to me. But I know that if I reread it, I will love it the more I understand about it, like I did with Interstellar.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's definitely understandable. Like I get what you mean, because for me it was kind of like the beginning was, I was like, am I reading like the right kind of book? Because it very much throws you into like the earlier 20th century, and you're just kind of like, where's the sci-fi? Where's like the things I was told about? So in the beginning I was a bit like, but then as the story unraveled, I think, and the real kind of protagonist came out, I was kind of falling in love with the story more and more, purely because of the way that it kind of grapples with certain themes that we'll touch upon in the spoilery section, but also kind of like time travel and like the mechanics of it. And I definitely think upon a second reread, there's going to be things that we'll get even more, especially if we've read like Station 11 and the Glass Hotel, I think it was. I feel like then it'll like enrich this book even more. But I think for me, it was just like, I was so engrossed by the narrative and the language. Like there were certain quotes that I just literally picked. And I was like, oh, and then there were theories that I had that then were proven wrong, but some that were proven right. And I feel like sci-fi novellas are something that like I really have grown to enjoy, because This Is How You Lose the Time War is another one that I have loved immensely, and it kind of plays to like the similar time travel theme. So I feel like for this, it just gave me feelings of that as well. And so yeah, overall, I rated it kind of like 4 stars. I was tempted to rate it like 5 stars, but I'm like, I think maybe if I enjoy it upon a second reread, it'll then push it that way.
Yeah.
But for now, I feel comfortable with giving it 4 stars because of that. And seeing from the chat, like a lot of people have rated it 4 stars, 4.5, 3. We had a few DNFs, which I completely understand if like the beginning kind of like threw you off a bit. But yeah. Was there anything else you wanted to say before we delved into spoilers?
I had like sort of like a slight expectation going in, just because a lot of people have said that if you like Piranesi, you're gonna like see Tranquility. And so I was like, how? Why? What's the correlation here? Yeah. And so upon reading it and upon completing it, I can see why, in terms of like the aspect of the tone of the book, the atmosphere, how it's very like subdued and very quiet, but it takes you on like this disconnected journey for like this sort of like reveal at the end that's sort of like solemn, very beautiful in a way. And so that I can sort of see, relate, and understand with. But yeah,
you could say the reveal was very full circle in a way.
Yes, yes, you can definitely.
I think it's something about these kinds of books that are like quietly destructive. That are just like you're seeing the destruction or like the and a construction of like a new reality around someone.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting to see the way that they perceive like their different kind of realities. So I think now is the best time to go into spoilers. So if you haven't read this book, would highly recommend you go and read it, and would highly recommend that you come back after you've like experienced the reveal. I would say there were basically like two big reveals in this book. The first one being they're living in a simulation.
Yeah,
If
which is so
that's
wild. That was
if it's
crazy.
like if it is, if it isn't, who knows? But then also, is that true if the second reveal then showed us that the thing happened because of Gasperi being in the same location throughout history, and that just caused whatever it was to just go and destroy itself for a little bit.
Yeah, I really liked how there was a quote in the book where it's just like you know, like one of the characters was asking the question, "How was it gas?" I don't know, I don't remember, but one of them asked, "How do you investigate reality?" You know, this
Mhm.
question of living in the simulation, which I think is so interesting because there's so many times in our reality where we're just like, "What's going on? Is this real?" The Mandela
Mhm.
effect and whatnot, all those weird, you know, weird things out there. So it was just very interesting because I was not expecting this book. I don't even know, like the sci-fi aspect of it was very interesting to me.
Yeah.
So
That's something I was thinking about too, like when I was thinking about how I wanted to wrap up what I was thinking is that it feels like a very approachable sci-fi. Like I don't think that you
Mm.
have to love sci-fi to love this book, right? Because it feels like it kind of eases you into the sci-fi aspects. And Joel, what you were saying at the beginning of your review of like, wait, I thought this was sci-fi, like why am I in this like
Mhm.
totally different period? I feel like that may have helped me with easing into it because I think if
Yeah.
we would have like automatically started on a spaceship, I might have been like, what is going on here?
That's true.
So, but then I also loved like Project Hail Mary. So sometimes it's like maybe you need to be forced into the sci-fi, but maybe that was a little bit why I felt disoriented was just trying to figure out like what book am I reading? And I saw another comment way earlier that was like I just feel like it was trying to accomplish so many different types of genres in a shorter book. And in some
Mhm.
ways, I love how short it was because it wasn't trying to
same.
overwhelm you with too much. But there were
Yeah.
also times where I was like, God, I wish I knew more about this. Like, I wish we didn't leave this so
It's
fast.
that
Um,
one.
yes. Yeah.
I I I agree. Like it definitely did try to do a lot, but I definitely love what it did in the length that it was in.
Mhm.
Because I feel like if it would have been any longer, I feel like the story would have become too drawn out
Yeah.
almost. I feel like it perfectly nailed kind of like the amount of story that it needed to have. Although I did wish there was some like further kind of exploration of certain characters. I feel like with the story core in and of itself, that wasn't completely necessary. It's just my desire as a reader to like kind of explore more about like Vincent's like life and narrative and like kind of what happened to her, like how did she die? But we're never really told that. We're just like she went missing and
I think
drowned.
that character, she's the main character in the previous book, The Glass Hotel. Yeah,
Oh.
that's like so she's like a Easter egg character in this one. Apparently, I read the
Oh.
summary for the blur for the Glass Hotel, and she's like the prominent character
Which
in that
character
book.
was it?
Vincent, the one who
Vincent. Vincent.
disappeared. I
The
don't know
one
if she
who's
explicitly died or not,
oh.
but I guess we'll have to
Yeah,
read the Glass Hotel.
exactly. I would be interested in that actually if she is kind of like that Easter egg character because I was very intrigued by her, even though we only met her once in the book. But I was like,
Yes,
everything I heard about her, I was like, I want to know more about you.
I really liked how even we were talking about how things were not certain things were like not fleshed out. I really liked how they weren't. I really liked how like shorts and everything was like very compacted in a way.
Mm,
It sort of fit in how like the theme of the book where to me how this story was told everything was so short and small, like the way it was crafted. If in the beginning in the book they're like when the author would describe certain scenes they're like in tiny paragraphs, and then
yeah.
the sentence structure as well was like so small that made up
Hmm.
this like tiny paragraph and then shorter chapters. So I feel like not being it like certain flesh or not or certain themes not being fleshed out sort of like been theme for me. It was like it was okay.
Almost
So
added to it for you.
yeah.
Mm-hmm. Who would you say like your favorite character of this book was, though? Like, was there anyone that particularly struck to you as like, oh, them?
Okay, I'm maybe just confusing all the names together, but who was the professor?
The professor.
Or the woman that was going on like giving conference talks?
Oh, Olive,
she's the
the
author.
author.
Olive.
Yeah.
Okay. I loved her perspective just because I felt like career-wise, I was like, I feel like I understand you a little bit. But then just like that she isn't supposed to survive and then she gets a
Mm-hmm.
hint and like so I liked her story because it reminded me of like Contagion or like World War
Yes.
Z, where you're like their life could easily have gone one way, but someone gave them a hint, right? So
Mm-hmm.
and then just like I felt like her perspective, like when she gets back home and she has to like truly quarantine, I was like, this is literally what we were going through. Like it felt
Mm-hmm.
so weird to
Yeah.
read
Yeah.
such an interesting like perspective of like just looking out the windows and like missing
Yeah.
the real world.
It
So
definitely hit close to home.
yeah.
No, definitely. And I feel like Olive as a character was just very interesting because there were certain bits where I was just like, I relate to you on like such like a core level. And then when Gaspar's just like, if a time traveler told you to get out and go home, would you do it? And I was like, wow.
Wait,
took me-
would you guys, if you were in Olive's shoes, right? Hypothetically speaking, if someone was like, "Hey, I'm a time traveler, don't go home, just go straight, like, I don't know, go to the airport," would you do it in that instant?
I would totally
I-
listen.
Yeah, I feel like if it was an Olive situation where it was
Wow.
like, how
I've been
would
like,
someone
haha, you're funny.
Ellias dead 5 days later. Honestly,
You play
if they
too
were like,
much.
if they were like, why do you think I'm like I've got that name if it's only in a book that you've literally just written? So
I guess it's a big coincidence. I've been like, you're reaching.
what do you mean? But also,
I see you're a big fan.
But also, I'm like, if she's like sold a lot of books and she's able to like buy a bunch of like stuff for doomsday prep, I'm like, if she just went and then it turned out to be a hoax, then surely that it would just be like, oh, okay, well, you know,
Yeah.
Yeah,
best
I
be
agree
safe than sorry.
with Olive being one of the more memorable characters, just because her character was just really interesting to me in the time, like in the time zone that she was in, just because it wasn't like too far fetched out in the future where I didn't feel like a disconnect with all these certain like new technology and terminology and whatnot, like made up science fiction, and so it was still rooted in like grounding a bit, and how she had to travel to the moon and back to Earth for like her book tour, which is really interesting, and so yeah.
Yeah. And it was when Gaspari was like viewing that movie thing and he was like, oh yeah, with like he basically started talking about COVID and then everyone just didn't know what it was and he was like, oh yeah, that didn't happen. No, just ignore me. And I was like, oh god.
I was like, what are those 5 years of training? Hello,
literally
you're such a bad agent.
Just
that part was so cool to me. It was like so meta. I was like, wait a minute. Why are you writing about something I'm living through? And like people don't know what's happening like this. I thought it was just so clever. I don't know. Like
honestly.
I know that people are like inspired. There's a lot of books that are inspired by that right now. A lot of romances that have come out are like about being isolated and all that kind of stuff. But to have someone just like so poignantly write about an experience that we all just went through was so interesting. And that she was able to tie it back to other characters. Like it feels like she planned it, but she didn't, obviously. Like she couldn't have planned this book in the way that she did. So
it was definitely
I don't know, like sometimes I typically don't like it when like I read to like escape, like I don't really I'm not really here for real world references sometimes, like especially with the pandemic. But in this case, like it felt like it belonged in that story and how it all came together. Yeah. Gaspari. Say it 5 times.
Gaspari. But no, it's definitely interesting because at one point where I think one of the interviewers was talking to Olive about her her book, she was just like, do you think that like your characters could be living in another like plane of
Oh,
existence,
that's
another
cool.
universe somewhere? And she was like, oh no, definitely not, I hope not. And then when she mentioned like Gaspari, I was like, oh, is he like her book character but in another universe? That theory was quickly disproven, but like the way that they were like little like red herrings also sprinkled throughout, being like, well, happens if Olive's book was actually what was happening in like the other perspectives. And I was like, oh, interesting. Is Olive secretly Emily St. John Mandel? Who knows?
Yes.
Wait, actually, when I read reviews, apparently this book has some aspects like semi-autobiographical in terms for Emily, with her author like questions and interviews.
Yeah,
that
it did
aspect,
feel like that.
She said that she incorporated some of her real life into that.
Yeah, because it was like one of the people were like to her, oh, it's so nice that your husband is taking care of your child whilst you're out here. And she's like, I'm sorry, I think my translator's malfunctioning. I thought you said it was kind that my husband is taking care of his own child.
Yeah.
I was like, damn, okay. I was like, true though. Like,
also, I think Lisa said something really interesting. How centuries later, when people have found, the technology to live on the moon and travel back and forth, people were still writing books and reading books. And that with all that technology, reading fundamentally stayed the same, I guess, in this world, which I think is interesting, and I agree with too.
Yeah, I definitely think it's interesting, like, because reading will obviously evolve in like the next 100, 200 years.
What's next? Contacts?
Yeah.
I don't know.
Contacts where you can just scan the book. Brain implants that you can just download and read the book.
Yeah.
Although I feel like that would be good for academic work, but not good. I just would want to explore and enjoy the fiction. I wouldn't want to be able to like read it instantly.
It's almost like a VR experience where you're like in the story as a participant.
There's in Star Trek, I'm about to go into this, but there's a thing called like the holodeck where you can play like holo stories, and so you're like actually a character in the story, and it's just interesting because
that's really cool.
You can load like Shakespeare, you can load like there's one episode where basically Moriarty from Shakespeare just like escapes the holodeck and goes throughout the ship and causing disruption and stuff. It's very funny. But like, yeah, it's just interesting to like you say that, and then I've seen it in a TV show. So it's just like, but I think one of the things that I was like drawn to in this story was like kind of there was a point where Olive was basically saying something about kind of like post-apocalyptic fiction and how we're drawn to it because it's not the disaster that we're drawn to, but we're drawn to imagine like what might come next. And
what would happen
Olive
after?
Yeah. And then Olive was like, we long secretly for a world with less technology in it. So kind of like after everything's been destroyed, how do we like rebuild? So it's kind of like, do you ever think about kind of like a world after an apocalypse?
Yes. I'm the type of person to always like wonder and think about like those types of weird scenarios. Like what would happen? How many people would survive and how would we move on? Would we like move twice as fast just because where we are right now currently in the future, or what would happen? Would we just stay subdued? I don't know. It's just very, very interesting to think about. Would there be zombies? Who knows? Will we become the Walking Dead?
Who knows? I do find it interesting just because it's like it's not necessarily how the world's gonna end, but like kind of what comes after. Just like how would we rebuild? Like
I would probably like be one of the few to die first, honestly.
I
have so many handicaps. So
yeah. But I'm seeing everyone talk about Star Trek now. It's cute.
Also, I'm just gonna pose this question to you guys in the chat. Do you guys think we're living in a simulation? It's just a funny question.
Are we in the Matrix?
Have either of you seen Truman Show?
I know the premise of the Truman Show. I haven't watched it, but I know like kind of what goes on.
That's true simulation, and that movie is something that I think about all the time. Where I'm like, what if someone is watching me, and like everything's set up for me before it actually happens? So,
or what's that movie with Ryan Reynolds, where he was like a character in a game and an NPC, and he started like having this awareness that he's in a game that's controlled.
I know which one you're on about. I can't think of the
Free
title.
Guy, right?
Free Guy. Yeah. He's
Is
like
that
in a
new
simulate.
or older?
Yeah,
New.
that came
Yeah.
out a year ago or something like
Okay.
that. Yeah, so it's a little crazier and a little funnier, but yeah, same, I guess, type of scenario.
Or are we just
Yeah.
in a Sims game and someone is basically controlling us like Sims right now? I have a plumb bob above my head.
Have you ever seen that where someone's like, if you're ever walking in the hall and you forget what you were supposed to grab in the other room, it's that someone in Sims just deleted your action.
Oh my gosh.
I think about that all the time. Anytime I
Literally.
forget, I'm like, are you kidding me?
You should use that as an excuse.
Is
Yeah.
it
Anytime you
ADHD?
forgot something, we're in a simulation.
Is it ADHD or is my simmer just forgot what I'm doing? Honestly.
Oh, people are.
Ooh,
It's interesting because some of the comments were like, "Oh, if we're in a simulation, it wouldn't matter what we'd be doing." Versus like how I think Gasper was like, even if we were in a simulation, it still would be fine because we're still living this life, which I thought was really interesting contrast, like the irony of it all, right? Like the question of like, oh, if we had free will or not, and if we did have the semblance of free will, what do we do with it? If we want to live it like fully to the best of it.
Yeah. It is very interesting to like kind of consider these types of topics when discussing kind of like books that kind of question the nature of our reality in a way, which is very strange and quite existential. But I think it's one of these books that I think gives you a little bit of hope in the end, where it's just kind of where, like you said, Elias, like Gaspery's just like, well, if we're living in a simulation, who cares? Because I'm still living. So but yeah, I think at the end as well, where he kind of just begins to realize things about his life, particularly because he's about to go interview himself.
Wait, when did you guys get that twist?
It was when they moved to the farm and he was like, I need facial reconstruction surgery. And it was the line where he was like, I can't recognize myself, but I recognize that face. And then like and then like the next line was literally like, I found the violin, and I was like, oh.
Yeah. Boom.
I was like, okay.
Like he was the anomaly. Oh my god, I can't speak today.
Yeah. He was just like, wow, why did no one ever think of that? And it's like, well, you had a different face. But like the fact that like 3 versions of him, or 4 or 5, he basically existed in the same place throughout time at once. And it
was present in those times with other people.
Yeah. And so it wasn't necessarily like a glitch in the Matrix, or it could have been he caused the glitch in the Matrix.
Like, yeah, it was funny because in the beginning of the book, I was not sort of expecting like that super sci-fi route that we would take at the end. Like in the beginning, I thought like, oh, this is sort of like surrealist, like sort of like magic going on here, but it's not that. It's sort of like an interstellar type of I don't know, science, behind it and all.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really cool. So
yeah, I found it intriguing, and
I did too. Yeah,
just so clever.
Yeah, and like now I'm just thinking the whole thing's gonna loop, because now that he's met his past self's gonna go on the same journey and meet himself again, and this book is just gonna keep going.
There's a term for that, I think, where it keeps on going in a loop. The paradox? I don't know. Paradigm? I don't know if I'm saying it correctly or if it's in the correct term.
I don't think it's a
father paradox. I don't know.
Like the one where it's like those photos where like the stairs lead into the next stairs, lead down to the next stairs.
Yeah. And also there was like some scenario like this where in the Umbrella Academy season 3.
Oh, the grandfather paradox, where like you kill the parents of like, well, the grandparents of like someone, and then that means that person shouldn't exist.
You won't exist.
But since they're still existing, it's caused the paradox, which is then basically going to end everything.
Oh my god, this conversation is taking a weird turn. Next we're going to talk the Mandela effect. Is it the Berenstein Bears or the Berenstein Bears?
Oh my. Oh, damn. But no, I'm thinking, because it's kind of like that triangle, like the impossible triangle, where it's like you can never find like the beginning of that triangle because it's impossible. Jeremy Baramy. Have any of you
I know
watched The Good
of him, but
Place?
I haven't seen The Good
Ooh,
Place, but I know
okay.
of.
Okay. I will just say that Jeremy Bearimy, I recognize Jeremy Bearimy. So because basically time is shaped like Jeremy Bearimy. And I mean the
So many
actual word.
different things.
But yeah, The Good Place is very much an interesting show to watch, but it focuses more on like philosophy and but it's very funny and comedic at the same time. Like absolutely hilarious. Would recommend. Episodes are like 20 minutes, like each. So you go through it very quickly. And like as long as you're not spoiled for the first season, I would go into it without being spoiled for the first season, because the first season finale, the experiencing that is like not like basically very much experiencing like a mega plot twist in a book, and that's all I'll say on that. But yeah, I'm sure everyone in the comments and in the Discord will basically go on about The Good Place because of how good it is. Very much iconic. Did anyone in the chat have any questions about Sea of Tranquility that you'd like us to answer? Otherwise, we'll go on with like updates for like next month and everything else with that. And yeah, I'm thinking this microphone's working really well today with
It is
like
beautiful. It
Yeah.
really is.
thank you. I feel like I'm in a
Definitely.
podcast just like hello and
I
welcome
know.
to the late night podcast.
ASMR.
Ooh, like oh right. I think whilst people maybe him being at two places at once doesn't prove a simulation, but just caused a blip in the time-space continuum. I think this is what the book is trying to like ask the reader to contemplate, like whether it is just a blip in the time-space continuum or whether the programming of the simulation just messed itself up for a minute before it like fixed itself. And so I think that in and of itself basically says that we don't really know whether we're in a simulation or in the time-space continuum, but does it really matter?
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that answer as well, because it all comes down to what he said at the end too, as well, where he would like lived his life with Talia. Where he's like, whether or not we're in a simulation, we're living life to the fullest. I was happy, and so that's all there is to it. I guess there are several, I don't know, a lot more nuance to it if you want to, say, no, I mean, it's all for nothing if we are actually in a simulation, and you can also argue so many different ways, but yeah.
Would you want to travel back or forward in time?
Wait,
so
there have to be rules to this, because if you travel, would you be able to change certain things, or how far can you travel into the future?
I would say like you could just travel all the way back or all the way forward.
All the way back to the beginning of your life, or way back?
Way before then. You could probably travel back to the Big Bang.
How about forward?
Probably as forward
Anywhere?
as you can go. Probably till the end of the universe.
Gosh. I think
if you had a possession of a TARDIS.
I would travel forward. I would want to see.
Yeah. I feel like I would. I feel like I would travel forward unless I had a device that would make me invisible in the past.
We're just adding these little different tidbits.
Say that again, Joel.
I said I would travel forward unless I had a device that would make me invisible. Then I'd also travel to the past, because being visible in the past is very dangerous to me, and so I would rather not experience that. So unless I was invisible, I would rather go to the future. Well, what about both of you?
I would definitely travel forward. I think just knowing, the history, I think going to the future, maybe 50, even 100, or even like 1,000, 50,000 years, just be really, really exciting, but scary at the same time. I don't know, it'd be really interesting. Maybe like 100 years, the Earth might not even be inhabitable. So, but I don't know.
Someone said it above, like back going forward scares me. Yes, I agree. I don't know if I'd want to see if the world was inhabitable in 100 years. Like, I think that would petrify me. But then it's also like, what am I gonna, like, I don't know where I would go to the past. Like, because, like, just going back 100 years, like, I want to go back. What am I going to do?
Dinosaurs? Jurassic Park?
Why?
Relive your
I'm just
Jurassic
going to be
Park?
terrified the whole time. So
take a cool selfie. Be real.
I try and find King Arthur. I think if I was traveling back, I'd try and find King Arthur and see if he existed. Like, really.
Come on.
And then see where he buried Excalibur, just so I could go forward in time and bury it and be like, wow, now I'm the King of Britain. So
Oh my God. What a good answer. What a literature answer, too. Wow.
Would you warn Olive and the British guy? The British guy?
Yeah, the British guy, like Gaspare saved Edwin from like breaking down in a mental asylum. He basically went down and like tried to fix everyone's ending.
Yeah. Would you warn them?
Yes.
Yeah, I would too. I feel like because we didn't really know if like the university or the time agency or whatever, the time institute, whatever they're called, we don't really know if they're going to fix it, like fix what Gaspare did. But I feel like that him telling them didn't really do much for the time-space continuum in and of itself. So I feel like it wouldn't have a massive effect down the line. But yeah, I feel like those would be like slight things that I would give into, and I would accept the punishment for it. Because it's kind of like, once time travel is invented, someone's going to claim ownership of time and try and change things to like make it better for themselves. And so I feel like, I don't know, time could be the new rebellion against the system. Who knows? What about, did anyone else have any further thoughts on that before I move on to, I think I'm going to do one last question.
Ooh, would you want to live on the moon?
Okay, now 2 last questions. Okay, this is the one, and then I'll do the other one before we end the show for today.
I don't know. Okay, if Earth was still habitable, I would still want to live here because, hello, Earth, you have greenery, you have good food, you have all these things. Whereas I feel like on the moon, everything will be sort of like a replication or like product made. It wouldn't even be real in a sense because it would be transported, transplanted there. Yeah, and it's much smaller, right? I don't know.
I think I'd be okay if I was born on the moon, but I'm already terrified of flying, that the idea of getting on a spaceship and leaving orbit is so to my bones terrifying that I can't imagine flying to a new place to like settle on. So that part just scares me. But I think if there was already, like in Interstellar, when like some people just like live in this like other space thing.
You wouldn't want to visit Earth?
If I was born on the moon and I knew there was a whole history on Earth, I would maybe love to go do that. If I already lived on Earth and there was like no history on the moon, I was just like part of the group of people going first, I'd be like, no thanks. You guys go set up shop and I'll stay here even if all we have to eat is corn like they do. And
oh, I would actually be like, all right, time for me to go to the moon.
Corn? I love corn though. So.
It's corn.
No, not for me. I would be packing all my dry ramen with me. Up I go. See ya.
Oh gosh. Oh my. I feel like I'd just stay on Earth because 2 reasons. First reason, I wouldn't want to be part of like colonizing the moon because I just feel like I'd be dreadful at it, and also I don't know. I'd rather wait for it to be established. I'd go visit there, go on holiday.
Stardew Valley.
Go on holiday.
I am Stardew Valley on the moon. No. But then also, secondly, I watched a Korean drama recently, also called Sea of Tranquility, which was very weird and surreal to watch. And basically, light spoilers, but also when it doesn't really affect much. The water that they have on the moon is like not digestible for humans, and yeah, I feel like if they tried to use like moon water to like, you know, quench my thirst, I wouldn't want to experience that. I wouldn't want to be a test subject for that. Like I feel like if I was going to go colonize the moon, I don't want to be a guinea pig.
Yep. Yep.
And so the final question: do you feel the cover embodied the book?
Not
I think
my
it did for
cover.
me.
Oh.
I feel like mine
I think it did
did.
for me.
I feel like mine did, but yeah. Purely
The
because
reason why.
oh,
Oh,
go
go
on.
ahead, Joe.
Um,
Go.
oh, thank you. I feel like for mine, we have like the moon, obviously. Then we have like the forest on the bottom. And then if you can just see like the yellow lines throughout the book, you can I kind of view that as like kind of like music. There's no music notes on there, but I view it as kind of like music lines. Because I can't remember how many lines are on a line of music on a music sheet, but there's 5 on here, and I think there's 5 on the
Yeah,
music
I think
sheet.
it's 5.
So I feel like this tied into it a bit more than it did. And it kind of just feels like this is what they would see when they experienced everything all at once. Everything everywhere all at once. But I feel like this is kind of like the thing that they have. But yeah.
I like this cover because it's from far away. When you're looking at it, it's very subdued and quiet, and you can't really make out the title until you come up really close to it. And then once you do, you sort of see like it has like this grain effect that it has on it. Sort of like it's like a vintage old feel. I think I don't know. I really liked it. Like also the moon, as you can clearly see there. And so I like the cover. I think it encompasses it pretty well.
Someone said this. I love the cover. I just don't know if it embodies it, but I still love it. Like the moon, yes, but like I wasn't expecting all the jumping and stuff. So, and maybe that's what it is. Like it's implying tranquility, but then you see the moon and the horizon of what's to come. So maybe it does encapsulate it. But I do love it regardless. It does kind of give me that holographic Pokemon card feel to it. So that's what I love.
Ooh, the sprayed edges on your book.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh.
How? What?
I love that.
Barnes and Noble edition.
Oh, I just have a
She's
signed
special.
one.
I just have a regular one. I guess.
Yeah.
Regular.
Saying basic.
Basic. Oh, speaking of, I'll let you go first because mine's to do with the next month.
Okay, so there was just this one. I just wanted to, when I was reading this, there was like several like recommendations from mine when it came to like movies that I've seen that really reminded me of sort of like the themes and plots in this book. The 3 movies that immediately came to mind was Mr. Nobody. So good. It's very interesting. And it's like set in the far future, but it's very like thought-provoking as well. Looper, which also has that like, running to past selves and all that. And then there's this movie called, I think it was mentioned, someone mentioned in the comments already, but this movie called Predestination. It was wild. It's also set in the far future, science fiction. Yeah, I think all of these movies are very like action-packed, but very like thought-provoking, which I really liked. So
I do have a book recommendation. It's called The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson. And basically, it's so good. So basically, this one's more so, it's not time travel, but it's dimensional travel. Basically, Earth can like resonate with 380 other realities. And our main character, Kara, is dead in all but 8 of them. And if you're dead in another reality, it means you can travel to it because you can fill that person's gap that they've left behind. And so our character Kara one day comes across one of her alternate selves. And from there, she uncovers like a whole conspiracy with kind of like the system of dimensional travel and everything to do with that. And so it's very interesting. It's a very interesting read. And I know Micaiah Johnson's doing like a kind of companion novel to it called Ashtown, which I'm very excited for. But it's definitely an intriguing read, and I would highly recommend it.
That's awesome. That's really good.
But yeah, that is everything for today's live show. Thank you all so much for joining us today. Next month, we'll be doing our 2nd anniversary read for the Late Night Book Club as we celebrate having 2 years completed, where we'll be reading Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is going to be... You have a UK edition?
Listen, I do not like the US edition. I ordered this a while ago. It also has sprayed pages.
It does. It does.
The reason why I didn't like the US is because The
gold.
font to me, yeah, it looks so weird. It looked like I didn't like it. It wasn't a vibe.
I have it personalized.
Oh, you have it personalized? I just have it signed.
Oh, wait, is that the?
I just have it signed.
I just have it.
So disappointing.
But then we also have the Fairy Loot Special Edition.
Oh my goodness.
Stop. Get out of here.
Babel. And then underneath the dust jacket, we have we have the tower in and of itself.
Oh my god.
And then we have the Illumicrate Special Edition, which has a slipcase. So we have the like box on here, and then it slips out to reveal like that. And then on the edge, an act of translation is always an act of betrayal.
Wow.
Which is very much the theme of the book.
I'm about to leave. I am green with envy. Like, put it away. Put it away.
Green
I don't want to
with
see it.
envy.
Oh my gosh. Wait,
but yeah,
you read this and I know you really liked it. So I'm very curious to see
I mean,
what I'll think.
It's because I got the arc of it in June.
Mm-hmm.
I got it before then, but I didn't read it until June, I think. And I really adored it. And so I'm writing my dissertation partially on this book as well, because it my master's thesis basically delves into kind of the campus novel / the academic novel, and how novels set in academic institutions have basically criticized kind of academia in and of itself, and how basically we need to look to campus novels and dark academia to kind of form a better like system of academia in the future, which is going to be very interesting. I am not looking forward to like developing that further. I have an idea and I'm like, wow, an idea, and I'm like, actually doing it. But no, Babel is going to be one of the ones that I'm delving into because of the academic system of like the early 19th century / late 18th, which is another period of history that I'm very much obsessed with. But yeah, I'm very much excited to be chatting Babel with both of you, and it's going to be hosted over on Noelle's channel, which is going to be very exciting. And we'll probably do like a little reflection over like the past year of reading as well as we go.
Maybe we can rank the late night book club picks.
Ooh, like we did last year. That would be pretty fun.
Like our top 5 or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I think
our top 5s will be all so different from each other.
Yeah, I think I know one that's not going to end up on there, and that's like our last month's book. But
you never know. I'm just kidding. Change of heart.
Imagine if it was, I'd be like, this has to be a joke.
We should all just come up with our 5, and then we'll like talk about it at the beginning of next one.
Oh yeah, that would be pretty fun.
Okay, so awesome. We won't know how we feel.
We won't know.
Before we go, I'm curious to see how you guys pronounce. Do you guys pronounce it as Babel or Babel?
Okay.
Go
every Brit pronounces it as Babel, and I'm like, okay, but RF Kwong is American, so I'm like Babel. And plus, there's like a bit in the book where they call them babblers, and so I'm like, I'm not about to call them babblers because that sounds like Beyblade, and I'm like, they're not like spinning like spinning disc things, and I'm like, So yeah, I go with Babel.
Yeah, I was gonna say Babel too, but then I saw a video earlier where someone said Babel, and I was like,
Yeah, I've heard so many people, Americans, call it Babel, and so I was like,
interesting.
I grew up hearing it as Babel.
Yeah.
So. Well, I know Rebecca pronounced it as Babel, so
okay, then Babel it is then.
Cool. And is there an October book yet? We will be announcing the next book club picks soon. Just watch the space for like the Instagram and also the Discord server. So we'll have that all up promptly. Awesome. If there's nothing else we have to say, thank you all for coming today, and we look forward to seeing you next month. So yeah, until the next time, goodbye everyone.
See you guys.